Good morning, everyone. I'd like to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom as we go into the first Shabbat after Pesach, Parshat Shmini, which is also Shabbat Mevarchim, the Shabbos that we bless, the month of Iyar, and I hope everyone had a wonderful last few days of Passover. You know, yesterday was the day that Jews around the world recite Yizkor, and although the synagogue is closed, I walked over from my home on the last day of Pesach, which was yesterday, just about 24 hours ago. And I stood here at the Bima. When I walked into the shul and it was empty on Yizkor morning, it was a very eerie feeling. On the one hand, it was very sad and depressing to see the shul, which would ordinarily have been full with Yizkor participants coming to pray for their loved ones. The shul would have been filled with love, with feeling, with emotion, as people shed a tear and remember their beloved parents or family members. And here I was the only one standing in an empty sanctuary. It was a very eerie feeling. On the other hand, there was a great deal of comfort as I stood here, and at least I felt comforted by the fact that I was able to stand here and recite the prayers of Kel Malay for all of our loved ones, holding the synagogue's Yizkor book, reciting the names of all of our loved ones, with having the memorial boards lit up. And I felt that at least the voice of prayer was filling the sanctuary, and our loved ones were not abandoned or forgotten or neglected, but on the contrary, while every one of us was reciting Yizkor at home, at least here in the synagogue did not miss a Yizkor. The sacred space of the sanctuary heard the words of prayer emanating, praying for our loved ones' souls. When we come to Yizkor, we think about our loved ones. And when we think about our loved ones, we don't think about what they did. We think about who they were. You see, there's a distinction. There's a distinction between what David Brooks in his book calls personal resumes, character resumes, versus job resumes. Job resume is what you've accomplished, what you've done. Personal resume is who are you as a human being. And it reminds me of the story of two of the wealthiest brothers in the beginning of the 1900s. They owned A&S, Abraham and Strauss, chain department stores, and Macy's department stores, Isidore and Nathan Strauss. They were born in Europe, but they immigrated to the United States and became extremely wealthy, multimillionaires in those days. And every year they would go on a vacation to Europe. And one day when the brothers, Isidore and Nathan, and their wives were in Europe, Nathan said to Isidore, let's go over to Palestine. This was in the year 1912 the story occurred. And they said, let's see how our brothers and sisters in Palestine are doing. They went over to Palestine and they saw that the Jews were struggling. And they traveled for an entire week throughout the country, visiting with Jewish yeshuvim, Jewish communities, giving them comfort, support, and most importantly, generous contributions. After about a week, Isidore said to Nathan, Nathan, I think I've had enough. Let's go back to Europe. And Isidore said, I can't leave. There's so much more work to be done here. There's so much need. Isidore said, look, I've had enough. How many camels and how many yeshivot can I see? I'm going back to Europe. When you're ready, you'll join me. Isidore and his wife, Ida, left, and Nathan and his wife stayed behind in Palestine. They continued to travel and help the Jews in Palestine. Isidore kept on sending telegrams to his brother saying, Nathan, we need to get back to America. We have business to do. We can't sit around. Let's go. Come back to England so we could leave back to the States. And Nathan kept on postponing and saying, I have so much more work to do here. I have to help our fellow Jews. I'm not ready to go. Finally, Isidore sent a telegram to his brother Nathan, said, Nathan, there's a new ship, the best ship ever built. It's called the Titanic. And it's setting sail on April 14th, which is just a few days ago on Friday. It's leaving from Southampton, England, and it's going to New York City. And I managed to get us 4 tickets for my wife and myself, you and your wife, in first-class cabins to head on this maiden voyage, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we're going to get back home. Immediately leave Palestine, come to England so we could travel together to New York, back home. And once again, Nathan said, I'm just not ready to go. I can't abandon our brothers and sisters here. And Isidore said, well, send them checks from New York. And Nathan said, it's not about the checks, it's about the personal support that I have to give them. Sure enough, on April 14th, 1912, Isidore and his wife Ida boarded the ship, but Nathan and his wife were still in Palestine. Tragically, the ship went down. 1,523 passengers perished in the freezing cold waters just a half hour away from Newfoundland. And amongst those passengers who perished on that night, 108 years ago, was Isidore and Ida Strauss. His brother Nathan survived with his wife, and he felt that he was saved by fate. And while he mourned and grieved for the passing of his brother for the rest of his life, he doubled down and felt more determined than ever to help his brothers and sisters in Israel amongst all of his many philanthropic causes. And indeed, he devoted the rest of his life to helping the Jewish people, the settlements in Israel, the Yeshuvim, which led to the founding of the State of Israel ultimately. And of course, a famous city that he built that is named after him is the seashore city called Netanya, named after Nathan Strauss. Today, a city with 250,000 Jews flourishing with life. And that's what Yizkor reminds us. Yizkor reminds us it's not so much what we do in this world, in the sense of our personal ambitions and accomplishments and business acclimens, but it's really about the type of human beings we are that is remembered most. Our character, our principles, our faith, our values, our beliefs. That's what determines the course of our life more than anything else. What our heart and our souls are devoted to. Our family, our friends, our community. That's what remains the living legacy. That's what is remembered most of all. Not the business successes or the great acquisitions or the great deals we made, but the type of human beings we are. When we close our eyes during Yizkor, remember our loved ones, we remember their love, their goodness, their kindness, their neshama, their soul, their character. That's what stands out. Who they were, not their business resume, but their ethical resume, the type of human being they were. This week's Parsha, Shemini, we're going to read about the laws of kosher. And the Torah tells us how to identify kosher birds, kosher animals, and kosher fish. And when it comes to kosher fish, the Torah says there are 2 signs that identify a kosher fish. It has to have fins and scales. And the Talmud says, guess what? Any fish that has scales has fins. There's no such thing as a fish with scales that doesn't have fins. Ask the Talmud, why does the Torah have to say that a kosher fish has to have fins and scales? The Talmud says the Torah could have just said, if it has scales, kaskeses, then automatically you know it has snapir, it has fins. Why does the Torah have to say snapir v'kaskeses? And the Talmud answers, in the name of Rabbi lahagdil Torah la'adira, to make the Torah more elaborate, more beautiful, more lengthy. And the question is, how is giving us additional information that's not necessary, making the Torah more beautiful and more expansive? Once again, the Torah is very concise and precise. The Torah just said, if you go fishing and you look for a kosher fish, if it has scales, you know it's kosher, because there's no such thing as a fish with scales that doesn't have fins. Why does the Torah identify the kosher fish as having fins and scales? And the spiritual answer is that every law in the Torah has a psychological and spiritual lesson to it. What does kosher fish represent, and why do these 2 signs make them kosher? So our rabbis explain, according to Hasidic philosophy, psychologically, fins and scales represent 2 characteristics of a human being. Your scales is like a coat of armor. Just like the fish's scales protect it, what protects a human being from falling prey to different negative behaviors or tendencies or acts? What keeps a person ethical and moral? It's their scales. What is the scales of a human being? Your scale is your coat of armor. It's your integrity. It's your character. It's your values. It's your principles. It's your beliefs. That is your coat of armor and protects you from being a victim of becoming susceptible to committing acts that are not proper, acts that are immoral or unethical. They keep us shielded from the negative influences like the coat of armor of the fish. The scales of a human being are their beliefs and their values that they stand for. What are your fins? Your fins, like the fins of a fish, help propel you forward. It's your ambition, it's your drive, it's your achievements. The Torah is saying every human being needs both. You need to have integrity, and at the same time, you need to have drive and ambition to accomplish great things. But what comes first? Your scales. The first thing you need to have is your values. If your values are okay, then you can go out into the world with great fins, ambition, and drive and achieve wonderful things in this world. But first you have to have a coat of armor. And that is, I think, a very apropos lesson for the times we're in now. You know, typically, we're primarily preoccupied with our fins. running around morning and night, achieving, accomplishing, doing, succeeding. But for the past few weeks, we're sitting around with a lot of time, not as much time to focus on our fins, but more to focus on our scales. What are our values? I saw a beautiful quote that says, don't be afraid to start from scratch, because don't be afraid to start all over, because this time you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience. In a few weeks, God willing, or maybe months, we're going to start all over. They're already talking about phasing back into normal again, or the new normal, whatever that may look like. Remember that we're starting all over in a sense, but this time we're not starting from scratch, we're starting from experience, and including this past experience that we just had. What are our scales? What are our values? And with that, we can go back into the big ocean, to the big sea of life, and we could swim with our fins and achieve great things, but they have to come from a place of goodness, a place of compassion, a place of empathy and kindness and belief in God and faith. That's the way we will succeed most with our fins, when we have good scales. You know, this Monday night and Tuesday will be Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, and this year is a significant year because it's 75 years, 3/4 of a century since the end of the Holocaust. There's a story I read over the holiday in the Jewish Journal. The article is called "Family of Holocaust Survivor Mourns Over the Wrong Body." And it tells a story about this wonderful Jew by the name of Moshe who survived the concentration camps, came to Brooklyn, built a beautiful family with children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. Tragically, he died from COVID-19. The family was distraught. He was in good health, and tragically, he was infected with the virus, and he died alone in a hospital. And this was just last week. And the burial society said you could have a small funeral with 10 people with gloves and masks standing 6 feet away from each other. You have 15 minutes, but that's it. Tragically, there were a lot of funerals going on. The family gathered with just a minyan, and they began the burial. They recited all the prayers. They said the Tehillim. They said the Kelmale. They cried. They said goodbye to their beloved father, grandfather, great-grandfather. When they just finished the funeral, the funeral director came running out, and he said, I am so sorry, I apologize, but with so many deaths, we confused and mixed up the bodies, and we gave you the wrong body. That wasn't your grandfather. We apologize. Here is they brought out their grandfather. The family was furious. They were distraught. Here their grandfather had to die alone, had this small funeral, couldn't have a proper funeral, and now they even performed their funeral over the wrong body. They proceeded to redo the funeral again with the father, with Mr. Moshe Grunwald. The granddaughter wrote later in an email and in a post, and she said she came home very sad. But then they found out more about the person that they had performed the funeral for. And he was actually a mace mitzvah. A mace mitzvah is someone who has no family, no relatives to bury them. And it's the greatest mitzvah to take care of such a person's burial. This person who they had accidentally buried and done the funeral with was a very wonderful, pious Jew who had no relatives, and he died in his apartment alone. They didn't even discover his body till 4 days later. And had this family not been mixed up with this person's body, this person would have never received a proper funeral. He would have gone off and been buried alone. And now they understood why it all happened. The granddaughter said, my grandfather, Moshe Grumman, was a very righteous, learned man. But the one thing he despised was honor. He never wanted honor. He always wanted to give the recognition to others. My grandfather did one last mitzvah before he physically left this world, and that was arranged for the funeral of a Jew who would have never had a funeral. He made sure there was a minyan to say Tillim, to say Kelmale, to say Kaddish for this unnamed Jew, this Jew who died all alone in this world, to make sure that the honor goes to him and not to himself. This is what life is all about. This is what we should be spending our days and our years thinking about. How can we be of service to others? How can we lead a meaningful and purposeful life? How can we bestow kindness and love upon others? Because at the end of the day, it's that which matters. That is what is remembered. Like Nathan Strauss, what's remembered is his goodness and his kindness, and it lives on till today in the city of Netanya and in many, many Jewish causes and philanthropic endeavors that he undertook throughout his life. That is the measure of a person. Not how many businesses he builds and how much money he earned. That is temporary and fleeting. Just to give you one example, in our community, a gentleman in our community, Harvey Bird, texted me last night and said, Rabbi, my wife Wendy, who's a wonderful woman, God bless her and bless everyone in our community. has been sitting home and sewing masks for those who need masks. Does anyone you know need masks? I'm ready to send whoever needs masks. So I share that because if you need a mask, let me know or let Harvey know, and Wendy will be happy to send it to you. But once again, it reminds us about how the small little deeds we do, thinking about others, instead of sitting home and just relaxing or entertaining oneself, she's sitting home at the sewing machine thinking, how can I help protect others from my house? What can I do to lift my hands to be of help to others, to be a service of others? That is the measure of a human being. That is the lesson. And so as we go to Parshat Shmini and remember the laws of kosher, let us remember, yes, we all need fins. We need to succeed and achieve great things in this world, but it has to come from the scales. And as we go to Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, let us remember that although the 6 million tragically were murdered in cold blood, perished in the greatest tragedy ever known to mankind and surely to the Jewish people, but their living legacy is us, because you cannot kill or destroy love. You cannot kill or destroy goodness. The soul lives on and is perpetuated from generation to generation. Let us be the ambassadors of the 6 million in this world, ambassadors of light and goodness. And let us make sure that the focus of our lives is our scales, what we stand for, what we believe in. Not so much what we do, but who we are as human beings. And as we get an opportunity, God willing soon, to start all over again, let's remember that we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from experience. Let's use this experience to the fullest. And then we will swim and traverse the great sea of life, not only with abundant success, but with abundant happiness and fulfillment, knowing we've fulfilled our true mission and purpose for which God placed us here on earth. Shabbat Shalom to each and every one of you. Dini and I send you all our love and blessings. And at 12 o'clock, Dini will be doing a live Zoom challah bake, a schlissel challah, a special challah that we make on the Shabbat right after Passover. And we look forward as well to seeing Motzei Shabbat for Havdalah, as well as with our very own member Jacqueline Goldman, a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor, on Tuesday, Yom HaShoah, as once again we will commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day together. Although physically apart, spiritually, emotionally, we will join together to remember the Kedoshim, the sacred holy souls, and the remembrance of the 6 million. Wishing you a joyous and happy Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.